Museum, which to this day is very famous. I mean, you know, anyone in Oxford goes there, it's marvellous. They've got Pocahontas's leather jerkin that she brought from Virginia when she came to London there, and many other things. And so Sir Christopher Wren was both. Sir Christopher Wren was a builder. He built St Paul's Cathedral. He built lots of churches in London after the Great Fire, but he was also a Freemason initiated. Anyway, I've studied the history of all this, it's very interesting, and fast forward, initially it was just for men. They were patriarchal times, and for reasons, you know, women were off doing other things. And I suppose women were not really masons, builders. They had different kinds of guilds and things they were doing. So, but in France, in the 19th century, they decided to open up the Masonic lodges to women. And that's what co-masonry means. It means women and men working together, co-masonry. And so there are Masonic lodges, and not just in France now, but elsewhere, that are co-Masonic. And it has men and women equally. Thought about 500,000 members in co-Masonic lodges around the world. I've known, you know, members of the different types of Freemasonry. The main one in France, Grand Orient Masonry, is another form, but tends not to be the co-Masonry kind. So it's fascinating, and I've, you know, written books about this. Any questions about that?
No,
Comments?
Just a comment here. My late father-in-law, he was a Freemason in Norway.
Ah,
So, well, he called all the other ones brothers, I guess. So I don't think it was co-masonry in Norway in those days. Well,
I think there
not
are.
his lodge anyway.
No, he was with the other men.
Yeah, he was a master painter,
Okay, decorator.
Decorator painter.
Where was that? Which part of Norway was that?
Bergen, West Norway.
This is your wife's father?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I think in Norway there's quite a lot of Masonic lodges still.
Yeah, I think so. They wear their rings and.
Yeah. Good.
Am I? Just a question. Am I wrong when I think I've heard that the Freemasons are a part of the Templar movement from the old days? You talked about building temples and Templar knights and stuff like that.
So there is a tradition in the history of Freemasonry, which the most important thing to study is the work of a man called Chevalier Ramsay, R-A-M-S-A-Y, who gave a public, well, I don't know if it's public, but a lecture in Saint-Germain, in outskirts of Paris, about the history of Freemasonry. And he says the Templars gained a lot of esoteric knowledge when they were in the Holy Land for 200 years. They met Muslims and Jews and Christians, and they brought back a lot of esoteric knowledge. And although they were kicked out of the Middle East, when they came back to Europe, they shared that knowledge. And that's one of the reasons the French king wanted to suppress them. They were too wise. It's an example of Sophiophobia. And they were quite tolerant. They appreciated Jews, Muslims equally. They then went underground and resurfaced. So historians of Freemasonry in the 18th century often find an overlap with the Templar movement, which became an esoteric movement. It was suppressed by the papacy, but it survived on the fringes of society. And then it came back in a big way. So my father-in-law was a Templar and a Freemason from Scotland. And so, you know, in Britain in the 1940s, 50s, the two were sort of married up. So, yeah, there's a link there, which, you know, sadly we don't have time to do in depth. Yeah. Right,
Food for thoughts.
food for thought, okay. Now, right, let's move on and do our Tarot of the Gods then, shall we? We've looked at our 3. Yes. Ha. Right. Let's have a look here. You choose one.
Let go.
Oh, you got 2, is it? Okay. Right. Okay. And I'll do one for you as well.
Go deep into the deck.
Ah. Right. Okay.
Nebo, Ace of Air.
Aha.
Ace of Air.
Right.
Helios, 4 of Fire. Shamash.
Okay. Let's have a look at these then. So the 2 volumes that go with this. So the Tarot of the Gods is in 4 suits: earth, air, fire, and water for each of the elements.
Okay,
Yours is a fire card,
I'm near air.
and his is an air card. So let's look at the air one first.
One can't go without the other one.
Ha! They're interdependent because you can't have fire without air.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I learned that when I took some fire training as part of my maritime education.
Okay. Yes. So the Ace of Air, Nabu, is I mean I love all the gods. I'm not going to say which I love most, but I certainly love Nabu as one of my line managers because he was the god of scholars and scribes in Mesopotamia. And I said earlier that Pythagoras had studied in Mesopotamia. So all philosophers, through Pythagoras, we all love Nebo. And he was the patron of literacy, the rational arts, education, and the scribes and wisdom. And the word is actually Akkadian, related to the Semitic root for the word prophet, a Navi. And it's the modern word in Hebrew and Arabic for a prophet. It's interesting that Nabu, the deity of learning, was in charge of the education system. And of course in Mesopotamia is where they first invented writing. Scholars and archaeologists have dug up, his libraries. So we know about Nabu's myths and legends from the cuneiform texts we've dug up. One of the great centres associated with Nabu was Mari, up in the Euphrates, where they found 20,000 clay tablets, all uncovered by archaeologists, in a 300-roomed palace of King Zimrilim. Archives were written in the Babylonian language. So, these were very learned people, very, very scholarly, very scientific. They were doing astronomy and mathematics. Another set was found in Ebla, which is it's in Syria. 2,500 tablets of writing have been found. So, I think the reason maybe Nabu's come into our readings today is to do with the codification of all the PhD theses. It's a very Nabu project. He would love that because some of these doctoral theses being done are on ancient Babylonian and Sumerian wisdom traditions. Wouldn't it be amazing to type in and say who's done a thesis on Nabu? And it would come up whether it's Paris, Moscow, London, Turin, Rome. And I think Nabu would like that. So that's why I say he's one of my line managers. As a scholar and a philosopher, he's really quite an important deity. And I'd like to see, that's why I'd like to see that project come into being. So, tell me what your interest in education is. Did you train in a naval academy, or how did you?
Not in the naval academy. I did that as a civil, so I trained in a
Right.
navigation school, radio school, civilian, and so it was basically education I had to pay for
Right.
myself. And
Right.
my
Yeah.
son actually went to the naval academy.
Oh, okay. And served in the Norwegian Navy.
Yeah.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, so knowledge is very important, and
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
branch we work in. So anyway, there's lots in the text that I won't read the whole thing out. It's fascinating, but I'll just read this. This is a quote from Madame Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical Society. In her Secret Doctrine, she says the following, 1887. Nabu, like Hermes, or rather Thoth, was a generic name. Thus, Nabu, the son of Merodach, or Marduk, and Zarpanitu, who respectively in various countries to great initiates was known. And that the names, thus Nabu, is also the one that Herodotus calls Zeus Belos. He gave his name to all the great prophets, seers, and initiates. They were all serpents of wisdom. She goes on to state that Thoth Hermes is also connected to Enoch, and so is Nabu. Now, Enoch was a prophet, a Nabu, if you want, who has 3 books written about him, the books of Enoch, which should be in the Bible. The book of Enoch is as old as the book of Genesis, and in the Ethiopian Bible, the book of Enoch is there. It's part of the text. I've done a commentary on the 3 books of Enoch, and he was a Mesopotamian prophet who visited the heavenly worlds. It's the first story we have in history of someone going from the earth realms to the kingdom of the gods, and what he sees and finds there and everything. Very ancient text. And so in a sense, Nabu is the god of the prophets as well. And Enoch as a book is worthy of being in the Bible. You know, it's like we don't have the full Bible yet. So anyway, fascinating deity. Okay, any questions about Nabu? The Ace of Air.
Do you know why those books were not included in the Bible? The more
Yes, sadly it's a thing that I call Sophiophobia, which is the fear of wisdom. The people that put together the Bible under the emperor's control kept out a lot of esoteric stuff because it was too, you know, it requires too much of the individual who's going on the initiatory journey to, it's a bit scary sometimes, you know.
Too much information.
It's not. It's too much transformation because the initiatory journey is about transforming the self from the rough ashlar, which is the kind of the stone that's all crumbly and broken and all that. You have to shape it to a proper stone that can go into a temple wall or something, and that's the journey the Freemason takes. And for some people, they don't like that. It's too much. It demands too much. Philosophy isn't for everyone. You know, it requires a lot of yourself. So they wanted to keep out the esoteric books. They said, oh, it's too dangerous. And there was a Latin thing going on there. Augustine, I think, helped keep them out, and other Latin scholars. They were wary of philosophy. But in Ethiopia and Africa, they got them in there because they were wiser. So that's why, I think. Good question, though. Right. Okay, let's now look at the next one you've got. So we've got Helios, the 4 of fire. And so fire is the very energetic element or principle that makes light and warmth and all that. We love it. How's the fire doing, by the way, back there? I think it's all right.
down to coals.
Okay.
It's died.
Oh no, that's terrible. Stick another log on. So it was Heraclitus that said fire is in everything. Fire is the arche, the source of energy. And we know that inside our physical bodies is the energy that powers the suns, the nuclear energy, as Einstein pointed out in his PhD thesis about electrons and photons. So I think the ancients loved fire because it's there symbolized by the sun. So Helios is the sun god who pulls a chariot across the skies, and they thought of the sun as a kind of chariot going across under the overall guise of Apollo, who is the lord of the sun. In Babylonian thought, he was called Shamash, which is related to the word Shams, which means sun in Arabic. I think this is about seeing and visibility, light. So we had a conversation earlier about secrecy and whether we should keep things secret. And I'm with Shamash and Helios. I'm saying no. Let's enlighten everyone. Let the sun come up. This is why I don't like so-called intelligence work, dealing with secrets and spying on each other. I believe in wisdom work, that we should share equally and truthfully as much as we can for peace. If your motivation is correct, then you can join the wisdom workers. If you're stuck in the dark arts of intelligence workers, then you're conspiring against each other. And you wouldn't get a ride in Helios's chariot, because the gods want us to be honourable and decent and truth-loving. So, yeah, I just want to say I love the sun at the moment because it's coming back here in sleepy old Betet. We're getting the end of winter.
Yeah.
And the sun was beautiful today.
Yesterday it was nice as well. Temperatures up to 18 degrees.
It's going well. Yeah, we're having a good, good glimpse of what spring does.
What's to come?
Yeah. So I give a lot of interesting details in the text that goes with. There's a famous writing by Lucian, who was a satirical author, Dialogues of the Gods, in which he has it's sort of witty and humorous thing. He says Zeus orders Helios not to rise for 3 days, so he can spend lots of extra time with his lover Alcmene and conceive Heracles. So they want to spend time in the bedroom, and so Helios was forbidden to come up for 3 days. That's typical Lucian. He just makes humour, which is, I think, important. We shouldn't get too serious about all these gods. We're supposed to be having happiness experiences on this planet. And I just want to share something else as well. I was going to say this at the beginning about humour. In the commentary on Matthew's Gospel, which I'm working on, there's sections in the Beatitude talks where Christ is obviously being funny. He's cracking humour. He's making puns. He's making jokes. And most people read the New Testament like it's a really serious thing and very heavy. But I think that actually he loved humour, like a sort of Jewish comedian. They love humour. And so this is an example of AI, why it's so amazing. So I just randomly, asked my AI support, has anyone academically studied humour in the New Testament? Save me looking at 100 library catalogues. Comes up immediately, yes. A chap called Elton Trueblood, who I'd never heard of, 1900 to 1994, has written a book called Humour in the New Testament. He was a Quaker scholar, He helped found Earlham College, Religious Studies Department. He was the Quaker chaplain at the University of Harvard and the University of Stanford in California. And it turns out he's an amazing scholar. And so thank you, AI. You know, I've got a new friend today because of this. And I'm going to have to get his book on humour because, you know, he realised, like I did, that actually Jesus was you know, loved the humorous side of God's work. And then it turns out Elton Trueblood was not only that, he was in charge of sort of policy, spiritual policy for President Eisenhower and a series of presidents. He was really respected in the American establishment, and he wrote a book about how America can defend itself against the lies of Stalinism and etc. etc. Which would be well to be read by Reagan. And sorry, it was read by Reagan, but it should be read by Trump now.
By Trump and his
And his little cabal that have seized power. Elton Trueblood was a substantial Christian intellectual, but who understood about some of the things I've been talking about and the importance of humour. So I think I just want to end with that. And Helios also. Oh, there's other funny stories about Helios because he had several love affairs. And Rhodes was his great centre. I've been to Rhodes, beautiful island in Greece. So anyway, we love Helios. Thank you. Come back and spend the summer with us, I think. Right, okay. Any questions about either Nabu or Helios?
I don't know if it's a question about Helios, but do you have any examples of humor from the New Testament? Or do you need to know the context too? Like what kind of thing would it be?
Sure. No, I can share something I was working on today, for instance. So, from Matthew. So he's giving his Sermon on the Mount, he's teaching, and Matthew lumps lots of stuff together. It's thought by scholars that probably didn't say all this at once. It was a place he would go to and give teachings, and then they wrote them down as if it was one thing. But he goes on to say, you're the salt of the earth. Hey, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything, just throw it away. So in other words, you are now initiates, you're into this esoteric wisdom I'm giving out. So don't forget that. You've got to be the salt of the earth. You've got to keep your saltiness wherever you go. And then he gives another example. You're the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. And the actual text says they don't put it under a meal tub. Now that's like a joke, right? Like, obviously here's a lamp, I put it on the table, it gives light. I'm not going to stick it under the table or in a box of, where I keep the flour. So that's a kind of a joke, really. That's
I think it's also a wisdom word, a word of wisdom.
Well, it's it's using humour to make a wise point, isn't it? Yeah.
Don't hide your
true light.
Your light under we call it under a barrel, whatever.
Yeah.
Which means that if you got something smart to say it. Don't hide it away.
Yeah, you have a duty.
Exactly.
I mean, as teachers, we have a duty to share if we know something. I think that's what Christ was saying, where he's doing it with a light touch. He's making kind of jokes about it so that the fishermen will get it, So you can see them having a laugh with all this stuff. So that's just one example, but there are many others. Yes.
Yeah, I don't care the name of your father, who your father is. Don't walk around on the Gennesaret Sea and scare away all the fish.
Fine, that might be one of Peter's jokes. Yes. Okay, well look, let's finish there. That was very good. Thank you. I'll shut it down.